These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. We have these ice cream guys that would ride on their motorcycles with the tubs of ice cream in another sidecar, and usually they would give out rides to kids to their homes as a way for their parents to buy them ice cream. Some are really nice, especially the ones that recognize you and would give out a free bar sometimes. Once, I was waiting for my parents to pick me up from school when I was in year 4. The other kids went home because my parents just got back from work and it was fucking raining because of the monsoon, and I lived at the East Coast at the time. The road was filled with rainwater, and I'm pretty sure I got a cold from that day. No sane person would ride out their motorcycle in the middle of the rain that hard. Except for the ice cream guy. I noticed that this was a different ice cream guy than the one that always came during after school. So I thought that he was new, and I've seen him a couple of times around my neighborhood as well. He saw me and motioned me to come closer and get on the sidecar so he could take me home. Even as a kid, I couldn't help feeling vibes from this guy because he's almost too friendly, and I didn't like that. I stayed in my spot under the roof, close to the guard because that's what my parents taught me to. He keeps insisting for me to come with him, even though I already said that I was waiting for my parents. And then he did the unthinkable when he got out of his parasol motorcycle and got drenched just so he could approach me. Instantly, I dashed to the guardhouse, ignoring the heavy rain just so he would stop following me. I told the guard that the ice cream guy was following me, and thankfully enough, the guard chased him out and threatened that he wouldn't be able to enter the school premises if he didn't back off. Deflated, he left, and I never saw him at the school again until I moved to the city. It's weird how desperate people could be to get someone to go with them at all costs. I was especially vulnerable because I was alone waiting and thankfully got out in time. Story 2. It's kind of funny, kind of creepy all in one, but back in school there was a weird encounter that kind of never added up. Growing up, I had this life-size cat in a hat stuffed animal, and I hated this thing since day one. I swore this thing watched me, and it just didn't seem right. I had tons of stuffed animals, but this one in particular freaked me out. I made my mom move it out of my room and put it in our playroom. I never went into that playroom unless I had someone with me, because I hated the thing so much. Well, one day I had a friend over, and it was storming like crazy, which put us in a spooky mood. We were telling each other weird stories, and I had mentioned the cat in the hat. I told them that I just knew something was weird about it. My friend suggests we go investigate it. As an 8-year-old, this is scary business, going to investigate my evil stuffed toy in the middle of a crazy storm. We get to the playroom, and there it is, but weird enough, it's facing backwards. It was up on a shelf that I couldn't reach unless I climbed on something. And I knew my parents didn't go there often. I was also an only child at the time, so it was scary. We peeked from around the door frame, trying to see if we could sneak up on something spooky. We were speculating if it would get up and walk somewhere, not knowing we were watching. We watched it for maybe 30 seconds with no result and left to investigate other creepy places in the house. The basement, my parents' room, LMAO, shit that is mysterious to a kid. It got boring, and eventually we wanted to go in the playroom to get something, can't remember what, and went to flick on the lights. Well, they wouldn't turn on. All we could see was the outline of things in the dark playroom with the rain pouring in outside the window. Then there was a loud lightning strike that lit the room up just enough to see the cat in the hat now facing our direction and looking right at us. I don't think I've ever ran so fast in my entire life. After that, I begged my mom to get rid of it, so I'm pretty sure she tossed it out because I never saw it again. LMAO. Story 3. While driving to California from Mississippi, we got caught in a huge desert storm somewhere in Arizona, or possibly New Mexico. There was a lot of rain and wind, but it started off normally enough. After about 5 minutes, though, it started getting crazy. The dirt and sand was so dry that all of the water coming down was kicking it up more than soaking it. So after a few minutes, both sides of the road were completely hidden by dust going up about 30 feet, and then above that was just rain with the freeway cutting through it. It looked like Moses parting the sea, except it was a freeway parting a giant dust cloud. So that was kind of neat, but then it got intense. Every time lightning flashed, you could see into the dust clouds, and there were multiple tornadoes/dust devils on each side of us. Deciding to take shelter, we pulled into a motel that was ahead of us and ran into the lobby along with about 4 other people who had come off the road. Just as we were getting into the lobby, the storm really took off, and we started getting hail too. One guy slipped in the parking lot and started bleeding everywhere, and me and my husband had to dash outside to literally drag him into the building. Then us, the guy, the others from the road, and about 6 people from the hotel, including the staff, just huddled in the lobby watching the security camera feed from outside on their desk computer. One by one, the cameras were getting taken out by hail or wind until eventually it was all just static and howling wind and dust outside the windows. It was like something from a disaster movie. I'll never forget it. Story 4. When I was 11 one summer, it was just my 2 sisters and me home when a tornado came. We lived in the country, so no alarms were heard. It was a thunderstorm that just kept getting worse and darker. We knew we had problems when in the middle of the worst part of the storm, all the wind died like someone literally flipped a switch. I looked to the highest point of some trees and could see the highest leaves sitting still. A few moments later, we could start to hear the distant sound of what sounded like a train, but no railroad tracks anywhere near. That is the sign of a tornado. We hauled ass into the basement, freaking out. We could see the tornado come across some farm fields into our next-door neighbor's backyard where it picked up a barrel. And as it came toward our place, it hopped our house, tore the antenna off, but no other damage. Story 5. I was in middle school and had some sort of after-school event. It was late January, and it had been lightly snowing all day and really cloudy. I called my mom on the phone at the school to let her know I was done. I was sitting outside, leaning on a bike rack while waiting for her to show up. I then hear thunder crack. I had never even heard of thunder blizzards before, but I experienced one that day. In the course of maybe 5 minutes, a fog rolled in, the snow got super heavy, the wind began blowing hard, and lightning and thunder was going off every few seconds. I moved away from the bike racks and into a small alcove to get out of the cold wind. After maybe 30 seconds from leaving the bike rack, lightning struck the bike rack I had just been leaning against. That day was the most scared I've ever been from a storm. Growing up in the Midwest, thunderstorms and blizzards are common, so I wasn't afraid of them, but both at the same time, combined with lightning striking where I had just been really got to me. Story 6. I'm from rural North Dakota, and 10 years ago, we had a blizzard that trapped my family and I into our home for 4 days. We had snow drifts 8 feet high, negative 30-degree weather, and we lived 15 miles from town. It's pretty typical for ND. It wasn't scary for me and my 3 siblings. We had a blast. My brother and I had a great time jumping off our roof into drifts and making tunnels through a yard. What makes this scary? My parents didn't tell us until we were adults, but there was only 2 days' worth of food in the house. My parents didn't eat anything for 4 days to make sure my siblings and I were fed. We couldn't figure out why my mom cried when the roads finally opened up. Now I understand it was tears of relief. My parents are good people and they sacrifice for us. If you can, go hug your mom. Story 7. This one morning I was preparing for middle school and it was 8:15. The sun would have been up, but instead there were these really dark clouds. I could hear thunder, but the sound was muffled, probably from inside the clouds. I went to the bus a bit scared as the sky seemed to get worse, and it started raining really hard, plus heavy. Apparently a tornado had formed near the area, which was enough to make a few kids in the bus start crying. While the bus was stopped to pick up a kid, lightning struck near a tree, missing. The sound that followed was luud AF, and seeing it was really scary. We later had a tornado drill 30 minutes into the first period, but the scare had worn off by then. Story 8. My husband and I were driving home from an out-of-state trip a few years ago in late March, start of tornado season. We stopped in Joplin, Missouri to get dinner before finishing the last few hours of our drive into Oklahoma, and I caught a glimpse of the television. It was a weather forecast showing a pretty nasty storm system a couple hundred miles away. It looked bad, but it also appeared that we would just miss it if we left right then and stayed on the turnpike. There's a zone between Missouri and Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there's like no exits anywhere to get off for gas or anything. The storm ahead of us looked pretty bad, and we knew we needed to turn off, but there literally were no exits. Lightning struck the side of the road as we passed by, and that's when I realized we were in trouble. After a little while of staring at a wall cloud, my phone started buzzing that there was a tornado warning in our area. I show my husband, and not 5 seconds later, a funnel cloud started forming in front of us, not a mile up the highway. Finally, a fucking exit showed up, and we swerved through it, as this would at least appear to be rather large tornado touchdown. Not sure how big. We pulled into the gas station and ran inside with a bunch of strangers. Then the power went out. I called my mom and told her what was happening and that I loved her. I was 100% sure I was about to be in serious pain. At the last second, this big-ass tornado turned away and destroyed a few houses, I believe. I can't remember if anyone died, although I believe there were a few casualties. We got back in the car and drove home. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. Story 9. I was training for a marathon and had an 8-mile run planned after work on the C&O Canal. I checked the weather after work, and all looked well. I'm 3 miles out, and the sky starts getting dark, and I feel raindrops. A couple minutes later, I'm stuck in the worst thunderstorm I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm alone on the canal, and the only way to get back is to run 3 miles back the way I came. It's raining sideways so hard I cannot see 2 feet in front of me. The canal is flooded with water, and I can barely run. Not to mention, I'm at a bend in the canal where it just drops off right to the Potomac River. It was utterly terrifying. So I'm running as fast as I can while my glasses are covered in rain, and I don't have a dry inch of clothing anywhere to wipe them off. I was so scared. Lightning and thunder is constant. Then I hear crack, and a giant limb falls off a nearby tree, crashing to the ground. I wanted to stop so bad and just hide, but I knew I needed to get back to my car. It rained the entire 3-mile run back to my car. I cried when I got back to my car. I was soaked, covered in mud, and shaking like a leaf. Only time it's ever happened to me. Story 10. Tornado season can get pretty scary if you don't have a plan or a place to go, or if you have a person who is panicking. A couple years ago, Oklahoma had a really bad tornado season. It was around the time of the May 20th tornado. So everyone in my family is pretty good about handling tornadoes. Except my dad. He goes into this panic/rage mode where he just has to take control, and he's freaking out, and he's yelling, and he's just generally running around like a chicken with its head cut off. There comes a time when he shouts, "Everyone get in the car. We are leaving." My mom tried to put up some fight, but in the end we all piled into the car and took off down the road. Everything is all fine and dandy. We found a good place to sit and wait out the storm. Then he decides we have to move. He starts turning down all these different roads, and we are listening to the radio, and the radio is basically saying that if you're in a car, you need to get out and find immediate shelter. Well, my dad says, screw that. We keep driving. The rain starts to come down on the car harder and harder until we literally cannot see in front of us, so we have to pull over. The wind was so loud and it was rocking the car. I start hyperventilating, and I'm pretty sure I blacked out for like a minute. Eventually, we found our way back to our house as the storm died down. Turns out we were in between 2 storm cells. We have a shelter now. Story 11. As a Canadian, I guess I can say the most dangerous weather experience we've had. Where I lived was a giant ice storm in 1998. Everything was frozen over. Power lines were cut and bent over. Cars were frozen over. Trees broke and fell into people's houses. People living in the outskirts of the city with farmland were almost completely isolated with barely any heat or communication. I was a kid, and I vividly remember my dad taking out a radio and trying to dial to a station for news and emergency reports in an era where lots of info just came from a TV or the newspaper. But of course, I'm Canadian. Terrible winters are a normal occurrence. So while that ice storm fucked up my home city for a while, most of the people were like, yeah, this is fine. You know what scares the crap out of everyone instead? The one time where we experienced a tiny earthquake for like 3 seconds. It destroyed nothing, and yet everyone and their grandmother was like, holy fucking shit, an earthquake, oh my god. Including me. It was the scariest experience I've ever felt. Not the most dangerous, but I definitely thought I was going to die for no reason. Story 12. In my 20s, I used to build farm irrigation systems. Those great big ones with multiple humps you see in fields. We had one rule. If we heard thunder, we're done. They are basically great big lightning rods. On one system, we were on the second day of building the systems, so there were already 3 spans up. We're working on the 4th span when it suddenly started getting bad real quick. There was a barn close by, so me, my coworker, and my boss hightailed it over to it. Within minutes of getting to the barn, the farmer showed up pissed. He was paying us to build that system, and he wanted it done now. My boss grinned at him and told him we would if he'd stand there with at least one hand touching the irrigation system at all times. The farmer got even angrier and was cussing and screaming. The wind and rain were going crazy, constantly changing direction. Sounded like the barn roof could go any second. Then multiple bolts of lighting hit the system right in a row. It was super loud, and we could see the lighting dancing along to where it connected to the well that gave the system its water. The farmer shut his mouth up real quick when that happened. Then, just as quickly as the storm formed, it was gone. The field was way too muddy for us to work in, so we had to let it dry out before we could move our crane back into it. Never did get any farmer to take us up on keeping their hand on the system. Story 13. Anyone who's been in a hurricane will understand what I'm talking about. I used to ask my father what the scariest part of a hurricane was. He had semi-frequent hurricanes in his native country. He said the sound was undoubtedly the worst part of it. I thought it couldn't possibly be that bad. Then Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast. In the thick of it, I decided to open the door just so I could witness this allegedly frightening sound. I figured it would just sound like a particularly strong wind. He wasn't wrong. The sound is indescribable, and no recording device does it justice. It sounds like an endlessly evil, omnipotent chimera roaring a nonstop battle cry. And the breath of said battle cry had the strength to topple homes and carry boats out of the ocean and nonchalantly throw them miles inland. It sounded like the most terrible of Lovecraftian horrors ever conceived. It's as though a beast only the divines could have the power to create had materialized to terrorize the world. To this day, nothing matches the primal, instinctive fear I felt in that moment. And our area was hit pretty softly, all things considered. Some trees and boats got tossed around, but no fatalities. No casualties at all, IRC. I can't imagine what being in the areas that were flooded and leveled was like. Perhaps what made it more terrifying, and this applies to natural disasters as a whole, is knowing that there's no fighting back. Throughout history, man has conquered many adversaries. Wildlife, sickness, oceans, mountains, even one another. But despite our many achievements as a species, we are still unrelentingly at the mercy of Mother Nature. Our only option against a hurricane is to run and leave everything behind. And nothing serves as a more sobering reminder than to get caught right in the thick of it. In that moment, standing in the doorway of the front of my house, I suddenly understood why the ancients wrote of these incidents as though they were sentient, heavenly beings. You hear the sound and see the destruction firsthand, and you'll feel the same way. Story 14. I live in an area that was also heavily hit by Hurricane Sandy. It was horrifying and unexpected. After everything that had happened the previous year with Hurricane Irene, which was nothing, everyone evacuated, and then we were all fine, the majority of people in my town decided not to leave for Sandy. Hell, we were originally supposed to go to school that day. But the night before, school was canceled. And that morning, we saw the rain pouring. We're on a peninsula with the bay on one side and the ocean on the other. The bay was pouring over the ocean wall from one direction. The storm drains were overflowing, and the ocean was rapidly rising. My family thought, as soon as low tide comes, we need to leave. And so we did. We stayed at my aunt's house about 40 minutes away. While there, we watched the newscasts, which were showing massive flooding, fires breaking out from exploded transformers, and chunks of our boardwalk floating down the street. I felt physically ill watching my home fall apart. Story 15. I grew up in Southwest Florida, so hurricanes and other tropical weather was pretty common. I think the scariest storm I lived through was Wilma in '05. I think it was the most intense named storm ever recorded. Only time my family ever evacuated our house for a storm, and even then we only moved to a hotel down the road that was more storm-sturdy, that our roker happened to be staying at to cover the storm from. Guess that made me feel a little safer. What you said rings true to me. I'll never forget that sound. I don't think I could put it so poetically, but it sticks with you. Story 16. 3 p.m. in Texas when suddenly black and green clouds roll in and it's as dark as night. I'm working retail as a manager and my cashier loves danger. I love storms too, but it was clear this was a tornado. She kept dashing outside to watch, even when the hail started. To make things worse, suddenly a bunch of customers rush into our store. Turns out the local mall kicked everyone out and hundreds of people were looking for shelter in the surrounding stores. My cashier keeps trying to go outside to watch for the funnel the Weather Channel says is on the ground less than 2 miles away. Eventually, I get everyone herded inside, and I lock the doors. Within minutes, the wind rips open and pelts the entrance with hail. I don't remember why we had rope, but we had rope. I think about a new sign that has yet to go up. So I had to go lash the doors together and stand there and hold the doors closed as well until the storm passed. I just remembered everything was so green. The clouds were green. The lightning was green tinged. We never did see the funnel, but suddenly it was over and the sun was out. Story 17. I've been through Hurricane Rita, Ike, and Harvey and grew up dealing with tornadoes. The scariest was a bad line of storms while my husband was working and I was alone in a 24-foot travel trailer with our newborn. The weather reported 3 tornadoes on the ground in our area, and the sky was a sickly green. I grabbed the baby and hauled ass on foot to my mom's house, about 200 miles away. I got pelted by hail covering him. We get inside. I run to the interior and get into her heavy cast iron tub with a towel over my still sleeping son in case glass broke anywhere or debris hit. I was laying partly over him when the house started breathing. I heard trees snapping in the yard and the crack of the power line getting ripped down. When it was over, I went to check the camper, and since the yard was flooded from heavy rains that week, the tires floated. The camper was about 8 foot from its original spot, and there were drag marks in the mud. Scared the hell out of me. Story 18. When I was in college, I worked as a delivery driver for a Japanese restaurant about a 20-minute drive from campus. One day I was supposed to come to work, and it was snowing like crazy. I decided to leave about an hour and a half before my shift because I knew it would be rough. I should have called them that it wasn't safe for me to go, but I was dumb and thought maybe I would get amazing tips if I was working. While I got on the small highway that took me there, I realized just how big of a mistake I made. I literally could not see anything in front of me, but I kept going, and it was the most stressed I have ever been while driving. I finally understood the phrase white knuckle because my hand were gripping the wheels so tightly. I finally got there and was about to tune into the parking lot when I got a call from my boss. She tells me they're not sure if they need me, so they hold on for an hour. They always forgot that I didn't live in the same town and had to drive a bit to get there, so they thought I was still at home. I say whatever and decide to head to the Target nearby and spend an hour just walking around the store. Then I get a call from them saying that they weren't going to have a driver today and I shouldn't come in. I had to get back in my car and drive another hour and a half up in this really stressful weather. I didn't even make any money that day. Story 19. When I was in 5th grade, we rode out Hurricane Ivan at home. I live in Bruton, Alabama, which was one of the worst hit places. Ivan hit hard. I can still remember watching the walls move. It was like they were breathing. The wind was so loud, I thought it was some kind of siren or something. It made my ears ring. My toddler brother and I were sharing a room. We had to pile into my parents' room after a window was sicker out of its frame, and you could see massive trees snapping like twigs. The aftermath was horrible, too. We were without running water for a week. No power for nearly a month. If they hadn't given out MREs, we would have starved. A lot of people stuck out in the country had to poach. It was an ordeal, but we made it through. Story 20. It wasn't scary because of the weather itself. It was scary because I couldn't find my pet in some pretty horrible weather. I have a free-ranging bunny. Basically, he's huge. I felt bad keeping him in cages where he had so little space to move, so we let him run around the backyard. Anyway, it was storming and raining really hard one night, and I was in the yard trying to get him inside. He was terrified, so he kept running behind the bushes and under the house in a little hole he had dug himself. Suddenly, I hear an incredibly loud wind, and I can't hear myself screaming for him or anything. I look behind me, and there is a fucking tornado maybe half a mile away. I can't tell where it's going. All I care about is getting my bunny inside, because now there's a tornado that could pick him up and take him away. I finally got him and ran inside and into the closet, and everything was fine. He probably would have been pretty safe under the house where he was, but I couldn't leave him out there. Story 21. During Hurricane Harvey, we got the warning at 9:30 p.m. that our neighborhood would be underwater by the next morning, so we had to evacuate that night or we were snookered for the coming days. We managed to arrange to stay at a friend's house who lived on the edge of town who had already seen the worst of the flooding, but the drive there was 45 minutes anyways. We were leaving with friends who were headed in the same area and who lived near us. On the route, which was detoured heavily due to heavily flooded roads, it was like a ghost town with water up till road level on either side of the roads. We had to keep passing some patrols, and we were always some of the last cars to pass each patrol as it was approaching their time to close. When it was time for us to go on to the next highway and take the exit from the previous one, there was a warning of two huge as bodies of water on the road. One was 1.5 feet and the other 2.5 feet. All of the patrols at this point had closed behind us, and it was around 11 p.m. at this point, so we decided to go through, as if not we would have had to sleep in the car by the road, which could have fully flooded by the next morning. My father told me to search up what the water capacity was that we could drive through, and it was 14 inches, which scared my family shitless in the car. When we made it to the first body of water, we managed to make it through fine, with both cars not suffering any sort of damage at all. Following that, we got to the second body of water, which was so much bigger and longer than the previous one. Only one side of the road was open, and the far left side of the road was slightly less deep, but after the left side of the road, there was a drop of a good few feet into a ditch. So we accelerated forward, but with a slight inclination towards the left. One of our wheels slipped slightly into the ditch, but my dad hit the gas and managed to accelerate out of the water, thankfully, through keeping his momentum in the water. This water body was a good 80 to 100 meters long, so it was unbelievably frightening. However, when it was our friend's turn to go through, one of their wheels slipped into the ditch and they managed to get out, but began to lose their momentum and started to skid, so the driver tapped the brake and the car stopped. The stopping of the car was around halfway in the water body. So the first thing that me and my dad did when we noticed was that we ran into the body of water and took their young ones out of the car. They were absolutely frightened. They were 7 and 9 respectively, and sat them down in our car. Then their parents exited the car, and my dad, the other dad, and myself had to push the car out of the water and push it onto the side of the road and wait an hour for a tow truck. We reached the destination intended at 1:30 a.m. What a fucking experience. Story 22. When I was a teenager, my room was upstairs at one corner of the house. I can sleep through almost anything, so just the fact that a storm woke me up at all was a little unnerving. Then a long rumble of thunder began. Then I realized that the rumble wasn't thunder, but was actually wind. Then my room started shaking. I ran down to the basement, and as I was running, it was lightning like crazy. No need to turn on the light at all. Deafening roar and cracks of thunder. It turns out a funnel cloud had most likely passed directly over our house. It touched down a few hundred yards away, going in a direction that indicated it went right over us. Several huge tree limbs right outside my room had snapped. A bunch of shingles had been ripped off the roof, most of them right above my room. The gutter outside my room had been torn off the house. According to a report, I found the area where it touched down indicated strong F2 or weak F3. This was before the EF scale replaced the F scale. My parents' house is on a hill. My room was on the most downhill side. So even though it was a 2-story house, from my window, it's more like a 3-story drop if you move just a few feet from the house. I fully believe that if the tornado had hit our house and I'd still been in my room, no idea what the timing was for me running downstairs and the tornado passing by. Whether IDV made out in time, if the funnel cloud was low enough, I would have died. Warning technology has improved a lot since then, so if it happened today, I'd probably get the warning in time. But that night, the warning wasn't issued until about a minute after I got downstairs. I'm kind of paranoid about checking the weather before bed now. Story 23. Driving from Ohio to western New York through western PA with a couple friends. This was about 10 years ago, so we had one of those clunky GPS units on the dashboard, but nobody had a smartphone. It's very late at night, around 1 a.m., and we're in a torrential downpour. Lighting and high winds. Very poor visibility. The GPS takes us off the highway, which we think is odd given we generally know the highway is the best/fastest route, but figure it may know of a closure or traffic. We're winding through back roads and small towns, encountering a couple of roads that are closed due to downed trees/branches or flooding. We find the entrance back to the highway and figure we should give another go, but a police car is blocking the on-ramp. This part of the highway is flooded and closed. So we venture on. Probably not helpful, but we're amusing ourselves by telling ghost stories and coming up with ridiculous "what if this happened" horror movie scenarios. By now the rain has stopped, but now a fog is starting to appear given the high humidity. A couple miles down the road, we see the only building that seems to have power, a fire station. An old man is standing outside near the road, so we figure we'll pull up and ask if he knows the closest entrance to the highway. "Hi there, sir. Any chance you know the way to the highway from here? That last on-ramp was flooded. We're trying to get north to Buffalo. I'm sorry to say, boys, all roads to Buffalo are going to be closed for the night. You're going to have to find a place to stay. You could come inside here and—" He didn't finish speaking before my friend driving stammered out, "That's okay, thanks," rolled up the window, and turned the car around. We backtracked for an hour to the OH border to get back on the highway and get the hell home. Story 24. A few years ago, I worked as a receptionist at a youth hostel out in the forest. There was a storm coming, and I was the only one on duty that night. Sometime after nightfall, the lights suddenly went out. A falling tree had taken out the power lines. We had fire safety doors that shut automatically with loud banging noises. I went outside to check on our guests who were in a neighboring building, separated by a large courtyard I needed to cross. It was almost completely dark. The wind felt like it was about to blow me away, and you could hear loud crashes as branches as big as an arm flew unseen through the night and into whatever unlucky thing was in their way. The only light was a flickering blue glow further up the hill from the severed power lines flapping in the wind, kind of like a distant fire, but with an eerie, pale blue light. Our guests were a class of teenage girls who were scared out of their minds, so I went back and forth between the buildings a few times to get flashlights and drinks for everyone, even though they told me to stay inside because it was too dangerous. I made it there and back in one piece, though. The next morning, the neighbor's entire barn was gone. Story 25. I was on my way to the southern part of our state to visit my sister at her university. My family warned me a storm was rolling into that area, but I thought I could make it. About an hour into my trip, I crest this huge hill, and on the other side, I see a massive black/purple storm cloud. It was late afternoon, so the stark contrast of this and the blue sky was pretty frightening. Being the young, dumb person I was, I thought that I could weather this one. The area I live in occasionally gets tornadoes. I've seen a funnel cloud as a kid, but it never touched. I keep driving, and at this point, it starts to get rocky and hilly along the roadside. All of a sudden, it's like 4 p.m. turned into 7 p.m., just murky darkness. A wall of rain starts coming down, and I cannot see a thing in front of me. My car lights do absolutely nothing. I panicked, but thankfully I found a car going less than 10 miles per hour with their hazard lights on. I tail them just so I know I won't go careening off the side of the road. Some parts of it in that area are a 10+ feet drop. I manage to spot a driveway and pull in. I start sobbing. I'm terrified of tornadoes. I don't have phone service. I can't see a thing all around me, except for the driveway entrance. The rain pounds on my car for maybe a solid 10 minutes or so, and the wind keeps howling. Finally, it lets up. I only had about 30 more minutes until I reached the university. Trees are scattered all over. Porches are torn off, and I even spot a car with a huge tree branch through the windshield. I told my sister all about it. Turns out the tornado touched down in that area, and I was really lucky to just get all the nasty rain where I was driving. She heads off to work a bit later. The tornado sirens go off. Another funnel cloud has been spotted. Thankfully, this one passes. Sheesh. Story 26. Way late to this, but I got a good story. I got a degree in meteorology and been a storm chasing. I've been in a couple of wild situations that I would describe as scary or unbelievable. But the scariest weather experience I know of comes from a former colleague. I can't give details on where or when because this person is well respected and this 1000% does not fit their public image. I can't take a chance anyone would guess. A colleague is at his friend's house chilling after school when they are about 16 years old. They're down in the basement and the friend pulls out magic mushrooms. They had taken them a couple of times and had set up the area as a good, safe, positive room for tripping. About 15 minutes after taking them, the tornado sirens go off. Friend and colleague rush upstairs where the family isn't sitting there glued to the TV. No, they're outside watching the tornado roll in from the west. And it's big, and it's coming right for them. The two of them are in crisis mode, and after what he describes as an eternity, the family all rushes back to the basement and bolts the door. He said it seemed like an hour and the grinding sound from the tornado just filled his head, but it was finally gone. He and his friend just started crying, and no one was questioning it. The family went above ground to see what could be seen, and it had passed less than a half-mile from them. Sirens were everywhere. They were totally tripping balls on the worst sort of trip when my colleague was called by his family to check on him, and they said he needs to stay there because his family, it's all medical and it's all hands on deck at the local hospital. Downtown is destroyed. He said that the two of them just sat in the basement crying for a few hours on the most horrible trip, praying for death. Huge tornado. I looked it up, and it was an F4 with nearly 20 killed by it. I don't do shrooms, but have known people who have. Many describe their trips as almost a religious experience. I think I would describe this for him, just perhaps the other way. My colleague told me about this a few days after I announced a tornado warning for our company building. I had told everyone to go to the designated areas. He was white when I was telling him, but wanted to talk about tornadoes afterward. Definitely tops my stories. Story 27. The night of the Lothar storm in the Paris area. This incredible storm took down a third of all trees in the area of Europe it devastated. My parents' property fit exactly those statistics, and at least 20% of the ceramic tiles fell off the roof during the night. The 200 kilometers per hour winds got under some tiles, and once a hole formed, engulfing gusts pushed tiles from the other side of the roof from inside. My dad and I spent most of the following morning picking up tiles and retiling the roof. Thankfully, we had a batch of spares, as obviously many broke when they fell. My dad was the mayor of a small town, so the rest of the day he spent answering phone calls from distressed locals, those who still had power and a phone line, and driving to various locations that had had significant damage, and some people needed a new place to stay as they had literally lost their roof. Incredible night. Story 28. I've had some close calls with lightning. When I worked at Kmart back in 1999, it was raining, and I was helping a coworker break down the gas grill we had set up outside of the store as a promotion, selling fresh grilled hot dogs and hamburgers, chips and drinks. Between the nursery and the indoor section of the garden shop was a solid door, which they had shut because of the rain. The grill belonged out in the nursery, and right as I opened that door, a bolt of lightning came down and hit the transformer right across the street. I saw sparks fly and the transformer itself catch fire. I slammed the door shut and waited for the thunder to stop before I opened it back up and helped my coworker roll the grill outside. Around the same time, my parents and I lived in an old farmhouse that once belonged to my dad. Being out in the rural area, we couldn't get cable service and satellite TV was still in its infancy. No local networks. We had to mount an aerial on the roof in order to receive any of the local networks. That motherfucker was one hell of a conductor. Whenever lightning would hit it, it lit up the entire house. I swear I saw a ball of energy race through the living room at one point, and everything had that bluish-white tint to it. Several years later, I think in 2012, I was at a Quick Trip getting gas before heading home. It had started raining, and I saw a bolt of lightning come down and hit a power line across the street from me. I saw the actual shape of the bolt, how it arced and bent in a couple of places. I had my hand on the pump as I was watching that lightning bolt. Story 29. Super late, but here goes. I lived on the outskirts of Tuscaloosa during the 2011 tornadoes. Where I lived at the time happened to be the place that got the first tornado of the morning. We woke up at 5-ish to the house, shaking, and took cover in the bathroom. I've always been terrified of bad weather, so I was sobbing the entire time. I was 14. Once everything was said and done, our windows had all been blown out, a tree limb went through my bedroom wall, and part of the roof was gone. We went outside to find the grill and the pool. The trampoline wrapped around a light pole on the other side of the neighborhood, and the house across the street, not more than 30 feet away, was gone. All that was left was rubble. It really, but me then how close we came to dying. Well, since we couldn't stay in the house, we headed to the nearest town to get a hotel. That town was Tuscaloosa. Once we got there, the sirens started going off again. We all tried to huddle together in the hallway. There were 30 or more of us there. Once we realized the tornado likely wasn't coming towards us, we all went and stood in the parking lot. The roar of the storm was deafening. It wasn't more than a mile or so away. I watched it eat buildings. 1 minute, an apartment complex was in sight. Next minute, there was a roaring rumble, and when the tornado cleared it, half of the building was gone. I have never recovered from seeing this. I still have panic attacks every time the weather gets bad. Story 30. I'm in the south of Sweden, and we don't really get any extreme weather. There's been like 1 or 2 big, scary storms and the occasional flood. The scariest for me, however, was this summer when I was a kid. I might have been about 8 to 9, and my BF and younger brother had gone down to a small stream to play. It was July, very warm outside, and the water was quite low. Suddenly it starts hailing, and the wind picks up. The sky was essentially still blue and clear as far as I remember, but their big-ass hails are pelting down. We figure it'll soon pass and hide under the nearby bridge. Not only is it now really windy, but the hail has gone from big to massive for Sweden. Almost 1 centimeter ords are coming down, and the whole stream is covered in it. Now the water starts to rise. It was warm, slow, and up to our ankles before, but quickly getting very cold, and it's soon over our knees. The hail hurts too much to go out in, and we hope it'll go away. Before we know it, the water is now at waist height. My brother is smaller than me and my friend. He can't swim. The water is now at chest height for him, and it's probably only been 10 to 15 minutes. We're freaking out, and just as suddenly it stops.